Aubakir Ismailov is a people's artist of the Qazaq SSR, a master whose name is associated with the early stages of Kazakhstan's fine arts history, the formation and development of the fine arts of Kazakhstan. The starting point in his interesting biography and destiny is related to one of the most important events in his life. Gulzira, I'm referring to the first traveling exhibition of 1928. How did Aubakir Ismailov actually happen to take part in it? Will you please tell us about this initial stage? The first traveling exhibition was organized by Nikolai Krytilnikov in Semipalatinsk, now Semey. Having heard about this event, Aubakir Ismailov went to the exhibition venue and submitted his drawings. All the newspapers of that time reported that quite a young man was participating in this exhibition. He was not even 15 years old when he took part in this exhibition. He himself recollects that time in his memoirs, how they rode on camelbacks from one aul to another from Semey, how they were greeted along their route, and what hospitality was given to them on the way. And when, after almost 2 months of travel and having covered such a long journey, they arrived in Kızılorda, where the final exhibition took place. According to his recollections, the main thing for Ismailov at this final exhibition was that he was given a recommendation and sent to study in Moscow. No doubt that this determined his future fate. We know him as a graphic artist, as well as a painter, and even as a master of caricature, and also as a master who collected and did excellent and very important research on Kazakh costume and national dance. From your view, describing his creative heritage, which of his oeuvres are most valuable or meaningful? His watercolors, graphic works or paintings? To what extent has he revealed himself most, and in which of these three kinds of fine art? I think that Ismailov has of course managed to embody all of these talents. Every definite moment of his creative life after Moscow, he made watercolors, painted some kind of industrial landscapes, did caricatures. Then he felt an urge for directing, so he went to Moscow to study at the State Institute of Theater Arts, GITIS, literally 2 years after graduating from the Higher Art and Technical Institute, Putein, in 1934. Upon completion of these courses, where he trained as a director, he came back and began to work first as a director at the Kazakh Drama Theatre, then at the Kazakh Theatre of Young Spectators, and staged his first performances. Therefore, it seems to me that he did what was interesting to him at a certain period of his life, with full dedication. Yes, with full dedication. When he felt like doing painting and fine arts, he went ahead and did it. Then his soul craved for a more vivid self-expression by being a director, or choreographing dances, or to be a ballet choreographer, or to be in the films. That is, he gave himself up to everything with the fullness of his mental needs. I think that since he was such a bright, energetic personality, he did everything with great love and great dedication. And this is reflected in his work. And to answer the question what is more important and what is of secondary importance, it is probably impossible to rank them by importance, but I personally would still place fine art, his paintings and watercolors first, because here they are, remaining for posterity. They are kept in many museums, in our museum, in regional museums of our country, in foreign collections and museums. Therefore, although his name is inherent to the culture of Kazakhstan in general, but it is to a greater extent inherent to the fine arts. because it seems to me that all the impulses of his soul are visible in his wonderful landscapes. Let's consider together several outstanding paintings by the remarkable artist. Already by mid-1950s, Aubakir Ismailov had developed his own individual style of depicting landscapes. And this work is rightfully considered as one of the most outstanding artistic achievements in Ismailov's work. Tell us about this work, Joly Hantengri.
Joly Hantengri создан Исмаиловым в 1959
Joly Hantengri was created by Ismailov in 1959, and this painting is undoubtedly perceived as one of the brightest landscape images of the vernacular nature of Kazakhstan, as well as the spurs of the Trans-Altai Mountains. At first glance, the painting depicts a kind of an everyday scene. A peacefully grazing herd, a trivial everyday hustle and bustle near the yurts. Somewhere in the foreground, we can see a helicopter flying. One might think, what could be simpler than such a plot? But suddenly, over it all, we see how the huge bulk of Hantengri is rising, as if sculpted from marble by a divine hand. And it is precisely in this plot that we can say that Ismailov acts as a director. He directs, he stages this scene. And in order to show all these mountain spurs, he uses an absolutely picturesque technique, probably not typical for conveying these mountains.
Показать вот эти все отроги горные, он применяет абсолютно такую живописную технику.
Look at the combinations of pale and pink colors, and going up the blue sky, the light clouds create a very special atmosphere. And then, when the gaze falls down, we are looking from the fog, and our gaze goes deep into space. This is also one of Aubakir Ismailov's favorite details, showing far into space. A winding river leads our gaze into the depths of these mountains. And perhaps the unusual thing about this particular landscape is that he chooses a vertical format, in contrast to his usually used horizontal contour line of the steppe. In this painting, the vertical contour line of the mountains prevails.
Всегда у него была горизонталь степи, а тут вертикаль гор превалирует.
The nature of Kazakhstan has always been a source of inspiration for Kazakhstani artists, but it was only Aubakir Ismailov who had a knack to feel subtly, understand deeply, and convey its beauty, grandeur, and epic monumentality. It is indeed true that the Almaty Mountains have a very special atmosphere. They cannot fail to delight us. One of the master's mature works, titled In the Vastness of Joly, embraces an absolutely immense space in its majesty, monumentality, and scale. And of course, the amazing manner in which this space is conveyed, first of all through a color scheme, the most delicate, subtlest pastel tones, through a high point of view, through the coverage and ratio of views, through the reunification in the same painting of human and natural, man-made, like this reservoir, and natural like a natural landscape, a combination of statics and dynamics, because the grazing, chilled horses are very organically complemented by galloping horses. And all this is an integral part of human existence, because the artist feels himself to be a part of this harmonious cosmos. This is true of the nomads, whose life he depicts in the foreground of this painting, and who are also an integral part of existence, living here in this world, in harmony with this cosmos, in indissoluble integrity and connectivity and the fullness of life. all of which the master glorifies in this amazing, poetic and romantic landscape. The painting Valley of the Gazelles was created by Aubakir Ismailov already in 1972, and in essence marked the mature period of the master's work. An amazing picture opens up before our eyes. Before us are very shy, very careful animals that behave completely calmly, because they know that nothing threatens them. They are in a completely natural habitat and are in a state of absolute peace, confidence and harmony. The scene of the gazelles resting in the foreground is amazingly in tune with the background, as it is repeated several times in the distance of the composition, like a certain rhythm or a certain repeating tone that builds the entire composition of this amazing painting. Definitely by this time in Ismailov's work there comes a complete understanding of the role of color in representing landscapes. Present here is this characteristic, surprisingly gentle, bluish-purple haze, which very often envelops the space of panoramic landscapes, thus creating an absolutely amazing musical sound of a beautiful picture demonstrating the achievements of a mature master of painting. Karagandhi coal mine is among the characteristic themes of Aubakir Ismailov, who loved and often returned to the genre of industrial or industrial technical landscape. Of course, this was a characteristic tendency of the time to glorify people of labor, to glorify the colossal transformations that were taking place thanks to humans, thanks to the development of technology and scientific and technological progress. Of course, coal mining, specifically in Karagandhi, was taking place on a huge scale. Incidentally, the artist was born directly in the Karagandhi region, and his father was a miner. This topic was familiar to him firsthand, so when addressing this topic, regardless of whether his compositions were small or monumental landscapes, such as those presented to you here, this theme was very well known and well understood by the artist. Depicting this large-scale scene, the artist also shows people both in the foreground and in the distance, and equipment, as well as the clouds of smoke emerging from the locomotive pipes. And all this, of course, delights the artist with its beauty, its foreshadowing of new transformations, which new time and human labor bring. And in this regard, of course, this composition is a vivid image of the historical characteristic of that era, of which the artist was a direct witness and participant. Aubakir Ismailov has left not only an outstanding pictorial legacy, he was also a very powerful master of watercolors. As we remember, watercolor is one of the most difficult techniques because, according to the testimony of professional artists, unlike oil painting, it cannot be edited. And of course, the feeling and understanding of this material, the success of his work depends on how much the artist masters the technique of creating watercolors. It is interesting that each watercolor sheet is not just another glorification of nature. This is, of course, a demonstration of an unconditional skill and understanding of the amazing possibilities of watercolor technique. Once again, magnificent peaks are revealed to us, surrounded by the lightest, thinnest air clouds. Or, on the contrary, with the next composition, the artist focuses on the vertical format. This elongated format allows one to show the divine principle striving upward, stone vaults of heaven which surround the tiny figures of people. But nevertheless, a man with his equipment, which cuts off fragments of rock, is also such a bright, full-fledged hero of the action or the event taking place here. It is interesting that in some of his works, the artist focuses on both nature and man and their general interaction with each other, And although very many compositions are similar to paintings, nevertheless, in a watercolor interpretation, they sound and are perceived in a new, completely different way. There is a lot of air and light in them, because this is the peculiarity of the watercolor technique. There is a lot of free space in them. It may not be by chance that the artist built his composition in such a way that most of the paper sheet is occupied by the image of the sky, light filled with light and air, the dome of which covers man. And of course, in the interpretation of the artist, it causes delight and admiration for his skill. Aubakir Ismailov was indeed a universal personality. The scope of his creativity embraced completely different genres, different areas of creativity. And one can see that the artist copes brilliantly not only with the landscape genre, or with the everyday genre, or with the industrial landscape, but also with the images of people. The portrait genre also became the path where Aubakir Ismailov managed to reach considerable heights. A striking example of this is a vivid textbook image of Kenisari Kasimov, an outstanding historical figure in Kazakhstani history, one of the fighters for independence in the 19th century. The Khan, who was lifted on a white felt carpet as a sign of special tribute of the people, becomes the main character of this portrait. The artist depicts him in such a way that, moving him as much as possible to the near edge, directly close to the viewers, he places him in such a posture as if he were cramped in the space of this small sheet, as if the scale of the greatness of this figure could not be confined by conventional frames of the painting. His profile image is full of special power, determination, fortitude, and this majestic profile against the background of majestic mountains and galloping horsemen, against this background, all this builds up into the image of a true hero of that time, who had left his mark on the history of our country. The Bartogay canvas is rightfully considered a canonical one in the work of the artist Aubakir Ismailov. It embodied all the basic techniques that were developed by him. This includes both a high point, visibility, and the scale and monumentality of the canvas format itself, and respectfully the greatness of the scene presented in the space of this canvas. And of course, it is absolutely amazing that the artist builds up the composition, paying attention to both separate details, be them goats who have come to a watering hole to drink, or a bird flying over the gorge, soaring, or the general greatness of the view revealed to him, to his sight. It is interesting that it is in this composition that he coloristically uses elements of some enhancement of individual color accents, both greenish and sparkling pink tones. Involuntarily, an association with the Kazakh traditional kurak-kurpe arises, because his mother was a craftswoman, creator of artistic products of decorative and applied art of Kazakhstan. I think that an appeal to such a color scheme and to such a characteristic trend of decorative art was partly due to the fact that from childhood the artist absorbed the traditions of Kazakh applied art that surrounded him from an early age and which became an integral part of him. That is, in general, we can say that even with this fine art, painting has become a completely new type of creativity for these pioneering artists. It is the connection with Kazakh traditional art, with traditional and national culture that has come from ancient times, that in many ways determined the work of these artists, the painters of the first generation, as well as Aubakir Ismailov in particular, since he was a representative of this first generation of artists who marked the birth of painting in Kazakhstan.